when I was reading Plato's account of Atlantis this week, and when I came to this section, which again for me it's so relatable to Deuteronomy 32.
Yes.
uh, I was thinking, because unfortunately the Bible in that section doesn't tell us so much how this was working, and I was thinking, well, could it be? I'm not saying it is, but could it be that in some ancient myths, the documents that we have left, that what is preserved to this day, couldn't we catch little pieces of the whole truth that we don't know? Could it be that in some crazy way God could have used Gentiles like Plato,
Hmm.
who is also called the proto-Christian, to tell us, maybe even though through some mythical stories, how this allotment between these sons of gods and deities happened between them, and how their wickedness happened because they wanted glory for themselves, they didn't rule well, they didn't judge well.
Right.
And then to go from that point, from Deuteronomy 32 to Psalm 82, when God comes in the midst of gods, that's the proper translation. He's scorning them for judging wrong, and he's about to proclaim the judgment. So I'm thinking, could it be that some of these stories, even though we don't know if anything is factual, but could it be through some of these stories we can catch how the ruling of these fallen deities, once when they were put there by Yahweh, could it be that we can see a glimpse of true story how they fell? So I just want to read this section a little bit again, and then I want to go to the next page. I just want to remind the audience what I read 5 minutes ago, that Hephaestus, I'm trying to read the word, I promise, and Athens, who share this brother and sister a common character and pursue the same ends in their love of knowledge and skill, were allotted this land of ours as their joint sphere. When it says this land of ours, this is speaking about Greece, right? Because Athens was in Greece. This is why the capital is called Athens to this day, right? But now check out the next page. Um, Poseidon's share was the island of Atlantis, and he settled the children born to him by a mortal woman. Ooh! So when you mention Genesis 6, look what's happening now with
Hmm.
Poseidon and the daughter, not daughters, but the daughter. We'll soon read this. Okay, so Poseidon's share was the island of Atlantis, and he settled the children born to him by a mortal woman in a particular district of it. At the center of the island, near the sea, was a plain, said to be the most beautiful and fertile of all plains, and near the middle of this plain, about 50 stades inland, a hill of no great size. Here there lived one of the original earth-born inhabitants called Evenor, with his wife Lucip. Lucip. It's almost like Lucy with Lucip with P at the end. They had an only child, a daughter called Cleito. She was just of marriageable age when her father and mother died, and Poseidon was attracted by her, again, so much like the fallen ones in Genesis 6, and had intercourse with her. That's a completely different story. How was a deity able to have a
Hmm.
sex with a woman? But again, this is very like Genesis 6, and fortified the hill where she lived by enclosing it with concentric rings of sea and land. There were two rings of land and three of sea, like cartwheels, with the island at their center from each other, making the place inaccessible to men, for there was no ships or sailing in those days. He equipped the central island with godlike lavishness. He made two springs flow, one of hot and one of cold water, and caused the earth to grow abundant produce of every kind. He begot 5 pairs of male twins, brought them up, and divided the island of Atlantis into 10 parts, which he distributed between them. He allotted the elder of the eldest pair of twins his mother's home district and the land surrounding it, the biggest and best allocation, and made him king over the others. And the others he made governors, each of a populous and large territory. So this whole next segment is about how then these people, or who seem honestly to be demigods, how they were like ruling. Okay, but before we go to that page, like, you went before me, even though I don't know if you knew the section I was about to read. So we see how Greece was given to Athens and her brother, and then the island of Atlantis was given to Poseidon. Poseidon comes there to dwell, sees this beautiful young lady whose parents just died. He had intercourse with her and begets 10 sons. And to these 10 sons, he divides the island of Atlantis
Hmm.
and gives them to rule over them. And we'll see later, because these people eventually die, but their children continue, ruling over this land. I mean, how mind blowing is this? Again, like I
Exactly.
said, even though we don't know much between what was happening between Deuteronomy 32 and Psalm 82, like God gave the nations to all the sons of God, but kept Israel for himself. Okay. And then in Psalm 82, God comes and judges this wicked small e Elohim because they didn't rule and judge righteously. Okay, but what was happening in this time? Like we don't know. So when I'm reading this, I'm like, dang it! Like, could it be again that even though I'm not saying this is true, but could it be that in some aspects of different mythologies, world mythologies, we see some glimpses of truth that can help us understand? Because later we'll see that these people were worshiping Poseidon, and at no point of time was he pointing to someone bigger than him, meaning
Hmm.
Yahweh, the God of the Bible. So I just want to ask you before I go to the next page, if maybe we can somehow hope that there could be in mythical stories like this, that there could be some traces of truth that we can put between, Deuteronomy 32 and Psalm 82.
Well, I would say we don't have to even hope. I think we can rest assured that it's most certainly the case that there are truths preserved in the pagan mythology. Saint Basil the Great expresses that very clearly, but within Scripture we see this very clearly expressed in at least two places that come to mind really clearly. One of them is Psalm 24, or Psalm 23 in the Septuagint. Psalm 24, it says, "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and all those that dwell therein. For he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? Who shall stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not lift up his soul to what is false, and who does not swear deceitfully. He will receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. Such is the generation of those who seek him, who seek the face of the God of Jacob." And then here's the part that I'm really driving at. "Lift up your heads, O you gates. Be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. For who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O ye gates. Lift them up, O ancient doors. Then the King of glory may come. Who is this King of glory? The Lord Sabaoth. He is the King of glory." Okay, so why did I just read Psalm 24? Because this directly answers your question. And the reason why is because we know when we translated the Baal cycle, which is older than this psalm, we discovered something very fascinating. King David got this psalm from the Baal cycle. In the Baal cycle, there's a specific. So, for those of you who don't know, the Baal cycle is the liturgical text of the worshippers of Baal, so Babylon and Mesopotamia. And in the Baal cycle, so basically it's their Bible. And what happens is the event that's being described in the passage where King David used to get this is there's a rebellion happening, and Baal is going to overthrow the Most High God. And so he goes to the divine council and he tells his plan to the divine council. He says, "Look, all of us gods can overthrow the Most High God because there's one of him and there's a whole bunch of us. So let's get together and let's do this." And what happens is that these two beings show up. And these two beings are basically like archangels. And they show up and they say, what are you guys doing? You're plotting against the Most High God Yom. And he knows what you're doing. And all of the gods start trembling and they bow their heads. And this is actually the moment where the tides turn in the story, because Baal stands up in the midst of the assembly. And in this story, remember that from this perspective, Baal is supposed to be the good guy. So he stands up and he says, lift up your heads, O you gods. Be lifted up, O everlasting ones. And then he describes himself as the King of Glory and basically describes that he's going to overthrow the Most High God Yom. So what does the psalmist do? The psalmist takes that story and says, yeah, that's not how it happened. The psalmist says, no, this is the truth. So you've heard this story from Baal's perspective. You've heard Baal's propaganda, but let me tell you what really happened. What really happened is that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Everything belongs to God, including you and me. All the inhabitants of the earth belong to the Most High God, to the true God, Yahweh. And then this founded on the seas and established on the rivers. Yom in the Baal cycle is actually the god of the sea. So the Most High God was the god of the sea. Well, King David says, guess who the real god of the sea is? Yahweh, who established everything upon the seas, who divided the land from the sea. And who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? Who shall stand in his holy place? Only he who has clean hands and a pure heart. Not you, Baal. Baal doesn't get to ascend. He doesn't have clean hands or a pure heart. He has lifted his soul up to what's false, and he's sworn deceitfully, because he's been telling you that he overthrew the Most High God, and he didn't. So he swears deceitfully. He doesn't belong in the court of God. And then the psalmist throws the very words of Baal back at him. Lift up your heads, O ye gates. Rise up, ancient doors, and the King of Glory will come in. So this passage, the way that the Orthodox Church uses this passage in our liturgical cycle is actually we use it at funerals, and we use it on Pascha, or in the West, Easter, and we use it to proclaim Christ's victory over the gates of hell. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, be lifted up, ancient doors, that the King of Glory may come in. And the demon responds with trembling, who is this King of Glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Jesus Christ has thrown down the gates of hell, destroyed their authority, destroyed their power, and ransomed hell. He's taken captivity captive. So the Baal cycle was preserving this truth in a sense, but it was preserving it from the villain's perspective, we might say. It's like that movie with Joaquin Phoenix, Joker, where the Joker is the one that we're telling his story instead of Batman's. It's the same thing here. It's like this is the story from the perspective of the villain. He's telling all of his worshipers, yeah, I had this plan which, by the way, if you read the Baal cycle, it's actually kind of hilarious, because he comes up with this plan and he goes and he fights the Most High God, and in the story he like totally wins, but then just by coincidence, because he so totally won, he then has to set up his throne in the underworld, not in heaven, because that's totally what you would do if you won the fight, right? You would leave.
He's so humble.
Exactly. And then the other passage that I think totally proves what you were saying, I won't read the whole passage, but Isaiah chapter 14 and Ezekiel chapter 28, I won't read them all. People can read them at home. I don't want to take up Nicola's whole show just reading and exegeting passages of scripture to you guys. You can read them. But in both of those passages, Isaiah and Ezekiel do something very interesting, because in both passages they are addressing the kings of foreign nations, and in both passages they use the mythology of those nations. So the mythology of Tyre and the mythology of Babylon, they use that mythology, but they turn it around. And so in the Baal cycle, again, Babylon's mythology, Baal ascended up into the court of the Most High God and into the seat of the divine council, and he overthrew the Most High God. In Isaiah 14, it says, "You, king of Babylon, you did this. You went and you ascended to the place of the Most High God. You said, I will be like unto the Most High God. I will go and I will overthrow the Most High God." And so you did that, but it didn't work out the way you've been telling the Babylonians that it worked out, did it? No, you were like a falling star because you got cast down out of heaven when you tried this, and you're an idiot who thought you could overthrow God. And God is all powerful. You can't overthrow him. That's stupid. And so Isaiah is actually mocking him, but he's mocking him with the words of his own mythology that he's been telling people. Same thing happens with Ezekiel. In Ezekiel 28, he describes Satan he's talking to the king of Tyre, and then as he progresses, though, he starts talking to the god of Tyre, not just the earthly king, but the god who reigns over Tyre and through whom the earthly king of Tyre derives his power. And he describes this god in the exact same language of the mythology of the Babylonians and the Sidonians. He uses the same language of this god being bright and beautiful and powerful and having a beautiful singing voice and all these things. He uses the exact words of their mythology, but then he says that because of your pride and your sin, you were cast down. So again, he takes the story and he takes what's true from it, but then he says, but that's not the story you've been telling, is it? You've been telling people the story. You've been telling them the truth, but you haven't been telling them the whole truth, because what really happened is you lost. And that's why you shouldn't be opposing Yahweh now. You're opposing Yahweh again in his people, and it may look like you're succeeding, but you will fail once again, because you've always failed. And we see that that's true. Jesus Christ has defeated the world, the flesh, and the devil. Jesus Christ has set us free from the power and presence of sin, and now his church is being established in all the earth. And all the nations that once worshipped Baal, now those nations worship the true God. Those nations became Christian and worshipped the true God. I mean, unfortunately, Islam came and swept over a lot of those nations, but at least for a time, they all worshipped the true God, and there are still people in all of those nations who worship the true God, and there are no people in any of those nations who worship Baal or Zeus or any of these entities. All of the people have come to worship Christ. And so Jesus Christ, by his cross, has conquered all of these entities. And that's what the prophets were speaking about. They were saying, Yahweh has defeated you, and you're still challenging him, but it's not going to work. He will always have the last word. So, is there truth in these myths? Yes, there is truth in these myths, and it actually, as St. Basil says, it actually is valuable even for us to study these myths to discern that truth. However, you have to remember that the ones who gave us these myths are the bad guys in the true story. So you have to remember that the myths aren't going to be totally accurate. And then you had actually asked one other question, which was, how can one of these gods impregnate a woman? And that's a really good question. And this is answered in Second Temple literature as ritualistically. Through ritual, they are able to somehow unite themselves to a human man. And this ritual is actually described for us not in the Book of Enoch, but this ritual is described for us in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And in the life of Gilgamesh, we know that this ritual is described for us because Gilgamesh is described as being 2/3 what's called Apkallu. And the Apkallu were basically a race of lesser gods who the Mesopotamians believed came. They actually believed they came up from the abyss, and the story is really creepy. I would love somebody to make a horror movie out of it. But they come up from the abyss and they start teaching people these rituals through which they're able to take possession of a human man, and then he impregnates a human woman, and then that child is considered 1/3 the son of the king or priest who impregnated the woman, 1/3 the son of that woman herself, and 1/3 the son of the deity who had taken possession. But here's the thing. Because the king or priest is basically, because his function is as the go-between between people and the deity, he is himself a deity. So therefore, 2/3 of this child's lineage are divine, and 1/3, the third coming from the human woman, is human. So this is why Gilgamesh is called 2/3 Apkallu, because his father, his human father, was actually a god, so to speak. His divine father was a god, and then his mother was a woman. So 2/3 of his, I guess, genealogy. This is not like a biological claim. This is a ritualistic claim. So 2/3 of the ritual are divine beings, and that's why Gilgamesh is supposedly so powerful in the story, is because he's actually 2/3 a god in that narrative. So I'm not saying that this is like 100% true, or that we should start doing this to try to have stronger kids or anything like that. But I'm saying that we've seen that God allowed the demons to kind of preserve their side of the account through these mythologies. And so as a result, we are able to answer some questions about what's happening in Genesis, and we're able to answer some questions about what's happening in the Atlantis mythology, because the Atlantis mythology is just giving us more details about what's happening, because unlike Yahweh, who wants to tell us the story of why the flood happened, but he wants to tell us the true story, the demons want to tell us their side, and their side involves, hey, we just saw these women, thought they were beautiful, and we impregnated them. They're not telling you that that was evil. They're just saying that it happened. God tells us that it was evil. They give us some of their kind of details of their story. So yes, I think that everything you said was totally spot on. Yes, these accounts are worthy of our attention because they contain elements of the truth, and understanding that truth can actually help us to understand Scripture in a richer and fuller way, which then helps us to see what Jesus is doing in his earthly ministry as well, because you can't understand the New Testament if you failed to understand the Old Testament. So that's why we're doing what we're doing today, because it actually does have a lot of value for the Christian.